The rain was merciless that night, the kind that drenched everything in its path, washing away dust, dignity, and sometimes, dreams. Ethan Cole stepped out of his sleek black Bentley, his tailored suit clinging to his body as he rushed under the awning of an upscale restaurant. The storm had delayed his dinner meeting, another negotiation, another deal that would make him richer. But as he reached for the door, something caught his eye. A hunched figure sat on the sidewalk across the street, shivering under the pounding rain. She was eating from a crumpled paper box, her frail fingers trembling, her soaked hair sticking to her wrinkled face. People passed her by as if she were invisible. Something inside Ethan shifted, an uncomfortable pull he couldn't explain. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps spread stories that remind us what it means to be human. For a moment, Ethan tried to look away. He told himself she was just another homeless woman, one of many in the city. He had worked hard to reach where he was, nights without sleep, sacrifices, betrayals. He couldn't afford to be soft now. But something about her felt painfully familiar. Maybe it was the way she sat with quiet dignity despite the rain, or the way her eyes, even from a distance, held both sorrow and peace. Against his own will, he stepped off the curb and walked toward her. His expensive shoes splashed through puddles, his mind torn between irritation and curiosity. As he got closer, the sound of the rain seemed to fade, replaced by the faint rustle of her plastic bag and the weak cough that escaped her lips. She was eating what looked like leftover food from a discarded takeout box, soggy rice and cold vegetables. Her hands were thin, her skin pale and veined, her face worn with years of hardship. When she looked up, her eyes, soft brown, familiar, hauntingly so, met his. Ethan froze. For a second, his world stopped. His heart stumbled in his chest, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. He knew those eyes. He had seen them in faded photographs, in fleeting dreams, in memories he tried to bury under layers of success. They were his mother's eyes. The woman who had raised him alone, who had gone hungry so he could eat, who had once held his face in her hands and told him he was her miracle. The woman he hadn't seen in nearly 20 years. His breath caught. It couldn't be her, it shouldn't be her. She was supposed to be far away, living comfortably, maybe even proud of the man he'd become. But life rarely follows our assumptions. As he looked at her again, his heart clenched in disbelief. It was her, his mother, Margaret Cole, the woman who once sang to him when storms frightened him as a boy, now sitting on the cold concrete, drenched, eating in the rain. Ethan's mind spun backward through time. He saw their old apartment, tiny but filled with warmth. He saw his mother sewing clothes late into the night to pay the bills, smiling at him even when exhaustion dimmed her eyes. He saw himself as a young man, angry, resentful, humiliated by poverty. The fights, the accusations, the day he left home shouting that he would never return until he was rich. That was the last time he had seen her. She had cried as he stormed out, her voice trembling as she said, "Just don't forget where you came from, Ethan." And he had. Now, standing before her after 2 decades of silence, he realized he hadn't just forgotten, he had abandoned. Ethan knelt beside her, his knees splashing into the puddles. She didn't seem to recognize him. Time had changed his face, and her eyesight was weak. "Ma'am," he said softly, his voice cracking, "Are you okay?" She looked at him for a long moment, her expression wary but kind. She smiled faintly, a ghost of the warmth he remembered. "I'm fine, dear, just a little hungry. The rain doesn't bother me much anymore." Her voice, gentle, melodic, familiar, shattered him. He swallowed hard, the weight of years pressing on his chest. He wanted to tell her right then, to say, "It's me, Mom. It's Ethan." But fear held him back. What if she hated him? What if she remembered the words he had thrown at her, sharp as knives, that he didn't need her, that she was holding him back, that he was better off without her? He couldn't bear to see rejection in her eyes. Instead, he offered to take her somewhere warm. She hesitated but eventually agreed. As they rode in silence, Ethan kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, his heart breaking with each passing second. She held the edges of the blanket he'd given her, murmuring a quiet thank you as if she didn't deserve kindness. He took her to a small diner and ordered her a meal. She ate slowly, with gratitude in every movement. When he asked about her life, she told him fragments, how she'd lost her small job after an illness, how rent had become impossible, how she'd moved from shelter to shelter until she ended up on the street. She spoke without bitterness, only a quiet sadness, saying, "Life is strange. Sometimes we lose everything, but we still have hope." Tears burned behind Ethan's eyes. He wanted to scream, to confess, to tell her he had everything, a mansion, cars, fame, except the one thing that mattered, her. He dropped her off at a temporary shelter that night, promising to come back. He didn't tell her who he was. He drove home, his chest aching with guilt. His mansion, usually so grand, felt hollow. The walls echoed with silence. He stood before his mirror and saw a man in an expensive suit, but the reflection no longer looked like success, it looked like shame. The next morning, he went back to the shelter, but she wasn't there. Panic surged through him. He searched the city for hours, asking people, showing her photo, until finally, he found her sitting in a park, feeding pigeons with crumbs of bread. She smiled when she saw him, as if expecting him all along. He sat beside her, the words tumbling out of him before he could stop them. "Mom, it's me, it's Ethan." For a long moment, she didn't react. Then her eyes filled with tears. She reached out a trembling hand and touched his face, her lips quivering. "Ethan, my boy," she whispered. He nodded, unable to speak as tears streamed down his face. She began to cry softly, her frail shoulders shaking. "I always prayed you were safe," she said. "I watched you on TV sometimes, talking about business and success. You looked so happy, I didn't want to disturb your life." Ethan fell to his knees before her, sobbing into her lap like a child. "I wasn't happy, Mom. Not without you. I was proud and foolish. I thought money would fill the emptiness, but it only made it worse. I'm so sorry." She stroked his hair gently, the way she used to when he was little. "You came back," she whispered. "That's all that matters." That night, Ethan took his mother home, not to a shelter, not to a hotel, but to his mansion. He prepared a room for her, soft and warm, filled with light. When she saw it, she covered her mouth with her hands, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You've done well, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm proud of you." Those words, simple yet powerful, broke something inside him and healed him all at once. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's life changed. The world saw a successful businessman, but behind closed doors, he was just a son trying to make up for lost time. He spent mornings having breakfast with her, listening to her stories. She started tending the garden, humming softly as she watered the flowers. The house, once cold, was alive again. But life, as it often does, had one more test. One morning, he found her sitting quietly by the window, her face pale, her hands cold. The doctor told him her heart was weak, years of hardship had taken their toll. Ethan refused to leave her side. For days, he sat beside her bed, holding her hand, whispering apologies and promises. She smiled often, even in pain, saying she was grateful to see her boy again. One night, as the rain gently tapped against the windows, the same kind of rain from the night he found her, she looked at him and said softly, "Do you remember what I used to tell you when storms scared you?" He nodded, tears welling. "You said storms always pass." She smiled faintly. "That's right, my love. They always do." Those were her last words. Ethan buried his mother under a large oak tree in the garden, where sunlight broke through the leaves in soft rays. He built a small bench beside it and sat there often, thinking, reflecting. His wealth, his cars, his success, none of it compared to the peace of those final days with her. He started a foundation in her name, the Margaret Hope Foundation, to help homeless mothers and struggling families find shelter, food, and dignity. When asked by reporters why he did it, he simply said, "Because kindness is the only wealth worth keeping." If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps share stories that remind us of love, forgiveness, and humanity. And before you go, I want to ask you something. If you had one more chance to make things right with someone you love, what would you say? Tell me in the comments below. Ethan often returns to that park bench under the oak tree. Sometimes it rains, and he lets the drops fall on his face, just as they had that night years ago. He smiles through the tears, hearing her voice in the wind, gentle, forgiving, eternal. Because storms, no matter how fierce, always pass. And love, no matter how lost, always finds its way home.